Hello, this is Kelly Fasterling, financial advisor. Today we're going to spend time on the investment vehicles that are provided through your employer. Now, if you work for a private company, you're familiar with a 401k. That's the terminology for that vehicle. If you work for a tax exempt or a nonprofit company, it might be called a 403b. If you work for the federal government, it's called a TSP. But all of them follow very, very similar rules and have very similar benefits and restrictions, frankly. I'm going to focus quite a bit on TSP because lots and lots of federal service employers and different agencies that all pay into that plan. Whereas a 401k plan and a 403b plan, there are so many of them, and each of them might have a few different rules and a few nuances about them. So, all of the information that I share about a TSP may be applicable to you with your 401k and with your 403b too. And it'll give you good questions to ask. So the TSP, the Thrift Savings Plan, it was created back in 1986. This is about the time frame in America where we were shifting from pensions and from employers actually covering your retirement in a defined benefit plan to shifting into 401ks, TSPs, 403bs into a defined contribution plan. What that meant is we moved from companies giving you an income for life after you retired to basically you taking care of it for yourself by creating your own retirement investment account. Okay. So the TSP is managed by an investment board that oversees an investment company. And that company today is BlackRock, that is overseeing those investments. And in future segments, we'll spend more time on what those investments are, what choices you have, all of those kinds of things. But this plan is number one, a way for you to save money for your retirement because most of us anymore are not getting a pension. Okay. But that plan is a way of also creating a tax benefit for ourselves. Okay. Now, in federal service, in the last segment, we did talk about the fact that you get a pension, your FERS or SERS pension, in addition to the ability to contribute to this plan for yourself, your TSP. Many employers do not have that benefit. There are a few that do still have a pension along with a 401k, but they're few and far between anymore. Now, in this plan, TSP, 401k, 403b, you make contributions to the plan. Now, there are limitations that come along with those contributions. One limitation is how much can you put in? If you're under 50, then you cap out at being able to put in $20,500 a year today. And those limits change year by year. If you're over 50, you can add additional 6,500 to that contribution amount. So you can put in up to 27,000 a year. And that really comes out quite often as a percentage of your income in terms of that contribution. Some of these plans have a matching program. What that means is maybe based on the amount that you contribute, they may match up to a certain percent. Maybe they'll match to 3% or 5% or 10% of your contribution and add that into your 401k, 403b, or TSP. In the federal service, that matching can be up to 5%. So if you are putting in 5% of your base pay, the federal government will match 5%. And so bottom line, you're doubling your money as it's going in to that investment vehicle. It's a really good deal. Now, as I talk to people that maybe have not set up that contribution, they think they don't have a TSP. In federal service, that's not true. The agency will automatically put in 1% of your salary whether you set it up or not, whether you're contributing or not. So you do have a TSP. Now, if you can put in the additional amount and get it up to 5%, then you'll get a full 5% match. That's a good deal. Okay. Many of the 401ks and some 403bs have a similar program where they'll match your contribution going in. So it's something that you want to just double check and ask your employer, do they do that? Now, there are investment vehicles inside your employer, these 401ks, 403bs, and TSPs. And a lot of the reason you might use one of those investment vehicles is because they provide tax benefits. Now, if you've been seeing your CPA, your tax accountant is saying to you, one of the ways to limit your tax bill this year is to make a maximum contribution into your traditional 401k. Now, I say traditional because there are two kinds of, sometimes 401ks. Inside the federal space, inside TSP, you have two kinds of tax benefit vehicles. You have a traditional TSP and you have a Roth TSP. What's the difference? The traditional vehicle is the one your CPA or your tax accountant's always telling you about. The traditional vehicle is the one that if you put in that $20,000 a year, then you get to deduct that from your income this year. And so if you made $100,000, put in $20,000, your income can come down and your taxable income would be $80,000 this year. So nice benefit. But it's pay me now or pay me later. So if you put in that $20,000 this year, then later as that $20,000 grows and grows and grows, and by the time you get into retirement and you withdraw it, you're going to pay tax not only on that $20,000 that you originally put in, you're going to pay tax on all that growth. Now, if you look at the numbers on that, there's a rule of thumb called the rule of 72. If you take what you're earning on an investment, divide it into 72, that will tell you how often that investment's going to double for you. It's just a general rule. So let's just say you're earning an average 8% on your investment. Divide it into 72, that investment's going to double every 9 years. So if you're putting $10,000 a year into your 401k or your TSP, and you're getting an average 8% on it, then that $10,000 in 9 years is going to be $20,000. In 18 years, it'll be 20 times 2, it'll be $40,000. In 27 years, it'll be $80,000. So instead of paying on the $10,000, you're paying on the $80,000 27 years from now. That's where you've really got to consider whether you take the tax benefit today in a traditional TSP or 401k, or whether you look to a Roth TSP or 401k. Now, not all companies offer the Roth version. The Roth version basically says, pay the tax now. But then you do not have to pay tax on the growth, on the distribution, or on the transfer to heirs. So let's talk about that a little bit. You're taxed at 4 different times in your life on your money. And I'm talking about your investments. Of course, you're taxed on your income, but on your investment, you're taxed, when you're making that contribution. So when you're contributing into your 401k or TSP, that's one time. So if it's traditional, you don't get taxed on contribution. If it's Roth, you do. But the 3 other times you're taxed are on the growth of that account, like we talked about, that growth from 10 to 20 to 40 to 80,000. That, whether you're taxed on that growth, and you're taxed when it's taken out. So the distribution of that account. And then if you pass away, then that account may go to your spouse or to your children or to a charity. You can be taxed at that time too. So in a traditional 401k, Roth, 403b, in a traditional one, you are not taxed on that contribution, on what you put in, but you're taxed at the other three times on the growth, on taking it out, and on the transfer to your heirs. Roth is just the opposite. You pay taxes now as it goes in, but you do not pay at the other three times. So it really comes down to your concept of whether you think taxes are going to go up or go down. So if you think that taxes might go up, then frankly, you'd rather pay now than later. If you think taxes might go down, then maybe you want to go, let's see, let me get that right. If you think taxes will go up, pay now, not later. Okay? Pay at this lower rate. If you think taxes will go down, you might do it the opposite. You might go ahead and defer your taxes till later if you think the tax rates will be lower. If you think taxes will be the same, and you're making a choice in how much you can contribute based on how much you got to reserve for taxes, then frankly, it'll be the same number in the end. But take a look at all of the challenges in the federal system with the deficit continually going up, with all of the COVID contributions and payouts that were made. Look at the Medicare and the Social Security spend, and the fact that as we come in here into the next decade, we got to figure out how they're going to get funded, because that trust fund that was created years ago really has been depleted. So there are a lot of things that point to the fact that taxes could quite likely go up. So that's where you want to balance that decision and really make a good choice for yourself on whether you just bite the bullet, pay the taxes now, or pay them later. Now, most of us are sitting in a traditional fund, a traditional 401k, a traditional IRA, a traditional TSP, because frankly, that's all we had back in the day. And it didn't, in federal service, you didn't even have the option to invest in a Roth TSP until 2012. So if you started employment in the federal system 20 years ago, you didn't even know about the Roth unless you were reminded of it in 2012. Likewise, in some private companies today, they don't have a 401k Roth, so it may not even be an option for you. But truly, a Roth vehicle can save boatloads of tax burden on your entire portfolio, your entire estate over the long haul, for sure. Now, a lot of times when people come to me, they think that when they move into retirement years from now, maybe they're making some real good money now, or they expect to be, and they're thinking when they move into retirement, the taxes might be lower. Well, if you've planned for retirement really well, then you'll have a Social Security benefit, maybe you'll have a pension, but then you also have this 401k or 403b or TSP that you've accumulated some money in. And your whole purpose was to kind of create a similar lifestyle to what you created while you were working. So, I was working with Sarah last night. She's making $153,000 right now, puts her in a 24% tax bracket. Now, when she retires with Social Security, with FERS, and with some funds out of that TSP, she's still going to be in that 24% tax bracket. So quite often what I find is many retirees are still in the same tax bracket. They didn't bop down to 22 or to 12% unless they're really willing to cut back on their lifestyle and on what they were spending while they were making that active income. So that's what you need to consider and think about. Now, on a 401k, on a TSP, on a 403b, there are some restrictions, some things to consider. One is if you're putting into a traditional account, then there's a liquidity restriction. What do I mean by that? When you put into a traditional IRA, bottom line, you will be penalized if you take that money out prior to age 59 and a half. Now, on most plans, once you hit 59 and a half, those funds do become liquid, and TSP it does. You can choose to take some funds out at 59 and a half. You can choose to roll them over to an outside plan outside of TSP. Lots of people do, and we'll spend more time in the next segment on why they might consider that based on the investment choices inside TSP. But in a traditional plan, there's a 10% penalty today if you withdraw those funds before 59 and a half. Now, in a Roth, again, you've already paid tax on it, so there are not the same restrictions on the money you put in, but there are the same restrictions on the growth. So if you put in that 10,000 a year and that 10,000 over 9 years grew to 20,000, the 10,000 you can take out without penalty before 59 and a half, but the other growth you cannot without a penalty. So check into that. But sometimes a Roth can be more liquid than you think. Now, there are also restrictions on the contribution. So on the contribution amount, you're restricted to putting in $20,500 a year if you're under 50, $27,000 a year if you're over 50. Now, the other consideration on a traditional 401k or IRA or 403b or TSP, there are restrictions on having to take money out. You're basically being told you have to take money out of it. Why? Because you didn't pay tax on it yet, and the federal government would like to see those tax revenues come into the coffers. Okay? That used to be at 70 and a half, you'd have to start taking your required minimum distribution. That since went up to 72, and last year it went up to 73. So now at age 73, you have to start taking money out of any of your traditional accounts. Okay? 401k, 403b, TSP, IRA. If it was tax deferred and you didn't pay tax on it way back when you contributed, at age 73, you have to start taking it out. Now it's based on a percentage. That percentage starts at about 3.9%. So 3.9% of the balance at the end of last year is what you're going to pay. What you're going to take out, distribute to yourself, pay tax on. Okay. Now you may have 3 or 4 different traditional accounts. An IRA over here from a previous employer, a 401k here, maybe you were in federal service and have a TSP. You may have multiple accounts. Let's say all those accounts add up to $500,000, and you've got to pay you've got to withdraw 3.9% and pay tax on it this year. You don't have to do it evenly from each of those accounts. You can take your required minimum distribution just from this account over here if you want, as long as the amount covers the necessary amount to withdraw from all the accounts. So things to consider. So consider your employer options, consider your 401k, 403b, TSP, and if there's matching, that becomes one consideration. Consider your liquidity needs, because if you might need that for liquidity to buy a house, to buy a rental property, to fund kids' college, then there might be better options for you that give you more liquidity in your account without that 10% penalty up to 59 and a half. We'll spend more time on the liquidity side and on other options in future segments. So that's it for today. That wraps us talking about employer plans. Have a beautiful day.